The sea was dead calm that night, a thing that sounds peaceful to a landsman but can put a sailor on edge. The difference, quiet and silent. Quiet, the gentle slap of water against the hull, the distant cry of a gull, the creak of old wood. Silent. Well, silent is when the ocean holds, and that's what's doing. Miles off the coast, with not another light in sight, my boat, the Sea Serpent, felt like the only solid thing in a universe made of black water and black sky. The moon had decided to take the night off, leaving only a faint dusting of stars, so distant they offered no comfort, no real light. The water was like a sheet of obsidian, perfectly mirroring dropping a pebble in it felt like it would crack the whole world. I've been in hurricanes that felt less lonely than that dead, flat calm. I've spent the better part of my life out here, you see. I know the sounds, the smells, the rhythms of this life, like I know the wrinkles on my own hand. I know the heavy, salty tang of an oncoming fog bank. I know the high, thin whine of the wind just before a squall hits. I know the groan of the boat as it rides a heavy swell, but this night had no language. It was just empty. A deep, profound stillness that felt ancient. I was running a long line for deep water grouper and swordfish, a patient man's game. You set your gear, you wait, and you listen. The ocean tells you. On that night, it was telling me nothing at all, and the message was deafening. I remember nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, the steam disappearing instantly in cold air. My gaze was fixed on the rod, their tips barely silhouetted against the starfleet. My thoughts drifted, as they often do in the long hours of the night. I thought of my wife, Mary, and the warm bed I'd be in if I lick of sense. I thought of a storm off the Cape in '78 that nearly took me and my first boat, the Abigail, to the bottom. I thought of the time young Daniel, my first mate for a few years, hauled in a marlin so big we both just stared at it for a full minute, breathless. Memories are a fisherman's currency, you know. We'd trade them with ourselves in the long, dark hours. But a feeling, a deep, cold knot in my gut, kept pulling me back to the present. It was the kind of feeling that makes the hair on your arm stand up for no reason you can name. An animal instinct, maybe. A sense that you are being watched from a place you cannot see. I checked my watch. A little past midnight, the time when the world feels thin, when the veil between what you know and what you don't is at its most transparent. I leaned over the gunwale and stared down into the water. My small deck light cut a weak yellow cone into the blackness, but it couldn't penetrate more than a few feet. Below that, it was pure abyss, a place of crushing pressure and eternal darkness, home to things that have never seen the sun, a place that has always commanded my deepest, and on that night, my deepest fear. I've always said, you don't own the sea. You're just lucky it lets you borrow a piece of its surface for a while. That's when it happened. It wasn't a nibble. It wasn't a strike. It was an event. The heaviest rod on the starboard side, a custom-built piece of graphite and steel I'd used for 30 years, bent over in a single, brutal motion. It didn't just dip, slam down as if a giant hand had reached up from the bottom of the ocean and grabbed the line. The rod holder, bolted to the frame of the boat, groaned in protest, a sound of tortured metal I'd never heard before. Before I could even react, the reel began to scream. Not the excited whir of a big fish making a run, but a high-pitched, agonized shriek of a machine being pushed past its breaking point. Line wasn't just being pulled out. It was being stripped from spool with terrifying, inexorable force. My coffee cup clattered to the deck. The spell of the silent night was. In 2 quick steps, I was at the rod, my hands grabbing the cork grips. The power that surged through it was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was a raw, primal force that jolted up my arms and into my shoulders, making my teeth rattle. I've fought 1,000-pound tuna that could tow this boat backward. I've tangled with sharks that fought with a malevolent fury. This was different. There was no thrashing, no panicked run side to side. It was just dead, downward pull, a straight, vertical, impossible weight. It felt like I had hooked the anchor of a battleship. I braced my feet against the transom, leaning back with all my 70 years of strength, my muscles screaming in protest. The rod was bent, a perfect, terrifying U-shape. I was sure it was going to splinter into 1,000 pieces. "All right, you devil," I grunted, the words swallowed by the vast emptiness. "Let's see what you got." I tightened the drag a little at a time, trying to gain some control. The reel only screamed louder, the sound cutting through the night like a siren. The heat coming off it was so intense I could feel it from a foot away. I splashed a little seawater on it to keep it from seizing up. This was no fish. A fish, no matter how big, gets tired. It makes runs, it changes direction, it gives you a moment to catch your breath. This thing, it was just pulling. A constant, immense, geological pressure. It was like fighting gravity itself. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. My back ached. My arms burned with a fire that went bone deep. Sweat dripped into my eyes, stinging them. The boat itself, all 35 feet of it, was being pulled slightly starboard, listing under the immense strain. The silence had returned, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the horrifying shriek of the reel. I was losing line, yard after yard of my best braided cable, into that black, unknowable void, and a cold, hard thought began to form in my mind. Whatever was down there wasn't just big, it was something else, something ancient and powerful, and it was slowly, surely pulling me down into its world of darkness. The fight had just begun, and I was already wondering if it was a fight I could possibly win. The first hour was a battle of pure attrition. My world shrank to the groaning rod, the screaming reel, and the burning fire in my muscle. Every instinct I had, honed over 50 years of fighting the sea's denizens, was useless. There were no tactics here. I couldn't pump and reel. I couldn't turn its head. I couldn't anticipate its moves because it wasn't making any. It was just a descent, a steady, unyielding pull into the abyss. I was nothing more than an anchor point, a flimsy piece of human resistance against a force that felt as fundamental as gravity. My knuckles were white. My teeth were clenched so tight my jaw ached, and the boat creaked and groaned around me, a symphony of strain. Slowly, I began to work a rhythm. I'd let the boat's gentle rock sway work for gaining a half-turn on the reel when it lifted stern, then holding on for dear life. It was like trying to winch a sunken locomotive off the sea floor. Foot by foot, inch by agonizing inch, the shriek of the reel lessened, replaced by the low, powerful grunts that were forced from my own lungs. The line, slick with seawater, was now coming in, not going out. A small victory, but one that cost me a mountain of effort. The creature, or whatever it was, didn't fight back, not in the way a living thing does. Got heavier. The closer it got to the surface, the more profound its weight became. The water itself was reluctant to go. That's when I noticed change. The air, which had been crisp and cold, grew heavy and thick, with a strange metallic tang. It was like the smell of ozone after lightning, but mixed with something else, something ancient, briny, like the smell of a fossil cracked open. Cold water smell that had no business being on the surface. The water around the boat also seemed to darken, losing the faint starlit sheen it had held. It became a flat, dead black, absorbing the light from my lantern rather than reflecting. The profound silence from earlier returned, but now it wasn't empty. It was expectant. The feeling of being watched intensified, coming not from the shore or the sky, but from directly below me, from the thing on the end of my line. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air snaked its way up my spine and settled in the base of the skull. Another hour, my body, a single throbbing ache. I was running on pure stubbornness, that old man's foolish pride that refuses to be beaten. The line was coming in faster now, the spool on the reel reappearing from its empty state. I was winning, or so I thought, but there was no triumph in it, only a growing sense of dread. What kind of creature lets itself be dragged from the crushing pressures of the deep without a single sign of struggle? What kind of being possesses that kind of colossal weight and power, but uses it only for a passive, downward pull? My fisherman's mind raced through every possibility. A colossal squid tangled in the line, a submerged wreck I'd somehow hooked, maybe even the carcass of a whale. None of it fit. The pull was too steady, too deliberate. Then I saw it. A disturbance on the surface, about 30 yards off the stern. It wasn't a splash or a fin breaking the water, a slow, oily upwelling, as if the ocean itself were bulging upward. The water turned a sickly, pale, milky color in that a faint, internal luminescence seemed to be rising from the depth, casting a ghostly glow that was far more unsettling than the darkness it replaced. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I kept reeling, my hands moving automatically while my mind tried to process what my eyes were seeing. The glow grew stronger, brighter. It was the source of that strange pale light. With a final desperate heave, I brought it to the side of the boat. The world stood still. It broke the surface without a sound. No gasp for air, no spray of water. It simply rose, and the sea parted around it. My lantern beam fell upon it, and my breath hitched my throat. My mind, a library of every fish, shark, and whale in these waters, had no entry for this. It was long, maybe 20-25 feet of it visible, with a body as thick around as my own waist. Its skin was the color of bleached bone, a horrifying corpse-like white, and it seemed to glow with a faint inner light, cold bioluminescence that pulsed slow, hypnotic rhythm. It was utterly smooth, without scales or fins, polished wet marble. It undulated gently in a movement of immense and ancient power held in reserve. But the head, dear God, the head. It was at the end of the serpentine body, smooth, oblong shape. It was perfectly featureless. There was no mouth. There were no gill slits. There was no texture or variation. And where its eyes should have been, there was nothing. Just a seamless, blank expanse of pale, glowing flesh. It was a creature born of a place where light had never existed, a being from the crushing black pressure of the absolute bottom. It had no need for eyes, because in its world there was nothing to see. The sheer wrongness, the biological impossibility struck me with a physical force. This was not a creature of our world. It was a visitor from a place we were never meant to know, a living relic from time of the sun. It didn't thrash, fight. It simply floated there, its eyeless head turned vaguely in my direction, as if it could sense me in some other, more profound way. The cold intelligence I had felt from the depths now radiated from it, a palpable presence in the air. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't frightened, it was simply aware. And in its blank, featureless face, I saw an emptiness mirrored the abyss it came from. I was looking at a piece of the deep, dark ocean given form, and I knew with a certainty that froze the blood in my veins that I was completely and utterly out of my depth. The rod and reel in my hand suddenly felt like children's toy. The boat, my fortress against the sea, felt like flimsy cork bobbing over a chasm of unimaginable horrors, and the creature just watched me with its non-existent eye, a silent, terrifying testament to secret. For a long moment I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My world had narrowed to the 10 feet of black water between me, thing. Time itself seemed to have frozen, trapped in the cold, phosphorescent glow of its skin. Every sound, the gentle lapping of the water, the low hum of the generator, the frantic drumming of my own heart, faded into a profound and terrifying silence. It was just me and it, an old man who thought he knew the sea, a creature's darkest. It floated, patient and ancient, its eyeless face a blank canvas onto which my own fear painted 1,000 horrors. Then it moved. It wasn't a violent motion. It was a slow, deliberate ripple traveled the length of its immense body, from the featureless head to the tail I couldn't see in the darkness, as the wave of motion's inner light pulsed, brightening for a moment, and in that I felt something, not a thought, a sense of immense age, of crushing pressure, of an existence spent in a cold, black silence that would drive a man insane in seconds. It was a glimpse into its world, a place without sun, without sound, without anything my mind could comprehend. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement. This is what I am. This is where I belong. And in that moment, the fisherman in me died. The part of me that had spent a lifetime chasing trophies, the part that measured success in pounds and inches, the part that would have given anything for a story like this, it shriveled up and blew away on the cold night air. What was a trophy photo compared to this? What was a story that no one would ever believe? To haul this thing from the water, to drag it into the light and the air of my world, suddenly felt like the most profound violation. It would be like capturing a piece of sky and putting it. It would be an act of supreme arrogance. This creature didn't belong on my deck or on a dock or in a... It belonged to the abyss. It was the abyss. Another part, much older, took over. The part of the man that knows to step quietly in a cathedral. The part that understands you don't shout at graveyard. The part that knows true power when it sees it and has the good sense to show it respect. I looked at this creature, a being that had existed in perfect dark harmony for millennia, and I felt a wave of shame for having disturbed it, for having dragged it violently from its home into my noisy, insignificant world. My hand, slick with sweat and shaking almost uncontrollably, let go of the rod. It found the handle of my sharpest filler knife, the one I used for cleaning tuna. The cold, familiar weight of steel was a small comfort in the face of the unknowable. I leaned over the gunwale, my face inches from the taut, humming line that connected my world to its. The creature's faint light illuminated my wrinkled. It did not move. It simply waited, with a deep, ragged breath that felt like my first in an hour, the razor edge of the blade against the braided line, the snap of the line shockingly. The tension on the rod vanished instantly. It sprang back to its upright position with a violent whip, and the sudden release of force nearly sent me stumbling backward. I watched as the creature, now free, was reclaimed by the sea. Without a sound, without a splash, it began to sink. It didn't swim down. It simply descended, a pale ghost returning to its grave. Its cold, otherworldly light dimmed as it went, shrinking from a glowing form to a faint orb, then to a pinpoint, and then was gone. The darkness it left behind was absolute. The water was once again a black mirror. The strange metallic smell was gone. The oppressive weight in the air had lifted. I was alone again. The loneliness different. It was deeper. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with memory of what it was. I stood there for I don't know how long, my hand still gripping the knife, my heart still pounding. I didn't reel in my other lines. I didn't care about the fish anymore. The hunt was over. I slowly secured the gear, my movements stiff and clumsy. I fired up the old diesel engine, and its familiar loud rumble was the most comforting sound I had ever heard. I turned the sea serpent for shore and never looked back. As the first hint of dawn began to soften the eastern sky, painting it in shades of gray and purple, I felt 100 years old. I had a new secret now, a memory that I would carry with me to my own grave. I had pulled a monster from the deep, but the true monster was the pride of a man who thinks he conquered the ocean. All I had done was knock on a door I had no right to open, and for one terrifying moment, something from the other side had looked out. The greatest wisdom the ocean can teach a man is humility. There are depths we're not meant to plumb, and secrets we're not meant to know. True mastery isn't about conquering nature, but in knowing when to show respect and cut the line. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.